Hey everyone, it's Kong again with the first challenge clear of this fireworks event. Going in after those Secret Realm outfit tickets. So, this is a return to a slightly more puzzly battle. Basically, the point of this battle is that you need to have this buff called the tinder, which is that little candle. Someone needs to be carrying that at all times. And basically, as soon as you end a turn, it'll disappear unless you're beside someone. And if you're beside someone, it hands the tinder buff over to that character, like you just saw Luna passed it to Elwin. So now Elwin's turn is already over, so he doesn't need to be beside someone, obviously. So if you lose that buff, then the boss does an attack that instantly kills your whole team. So it's basically an instant loss if you lose this buff. And there are a few ways that you can lose it. You can lose it by ending your turn not beside an ally, like I just mentioned. The boss also has a couple of attacks that make it go away. Oh, did I mention that tinder buff is also the only way to do damage to the boss? So you need to have the tinder buff in order to hit him. So it becomes a little juggling act of trying to make sure that your tinder isn't in the way of an attack that can dispel it, but also in the mix to keep doing damage to the boss. So that's kind of a lengthy description of the setup of this battle. Now, I'll talk briefly about the ways that you can lose the tinder, since it's gonna happen. Basically, the boss has two moves that are almost assured of dispelling the tinder. One is a big dark line attack that goes in a direction, and it dispels 5 buffs, and the tinder is one of those buffs. So when his line attack is up, you want to make sure that whoever has the tinder ends their turn on a side of the boss that doesn't have as many characters as the other side. That's a way of tricking the AI into using the line attack on the side where the tinder isn't standing. The other attack he has is a wind move, which attacks every square around him. So on the turns when that move is up, you want to make sure that the person who has the tinder is standing slightly away from the boss. So here's that tornado move. It's attacking everyone a square around him. Now, the final way you can lose the tinder is these little ghost cloud guys that are spawning. Each turn, one spawns in one of the corners of the map. And if they get close enough to you, they can use like a wind slash move that takes the tinder off, and then you automatically lose. So you want to have someone fairly mobile who can travel across the map and take those guys out before they get close enough to you. So in order to manage and remind myself of which of the enemy's attacks were up and which ones weren't, I actually drew a little chart. I'll show it right here. This is basically just a way of reminding me, like, what turn is it right now, and which attack has he already used. So the tornado attack has a 1-turn cooldown, so he can use that every second turn. The dark line attack, he can't use for 3 turns in a row after using it. So that's too hard for my small brain to remember, like, which ones are coming up at which time. So I just wrote it down. Even with all that info at hand, and even if you're drawing a chart, it can sometimes be tricky to remember, like, which of your characters has the tinder. If I go stand here, where is it going to end up? Is it going to end up close to the boss or far away from the boss? Is it going to end up on the right side or the wrong side? So before ending each turn or before ending each action, you really have to think carefully about, okay, if I rest my character here, what's going to happen? So, sorry about kind of front-loading that explanation right at the start of this video here, but my intention with that is that I want to explain the mechanics of the fight so that if you get it, then you can go ahead and try this fight a few times without having to watch like the rest of my whole video to see, 15 minutes of how I did this. So if that explanation is enough for you to go and draw a little chart and then play around with your characters, See, another difference of this fight, unlike the plot battles, it's not a set team, so you do have to bring your own characters to this battle, and therefore it is going to be a little bit of a stat check as well. If your characters aren't powerful enough to do enough damage to this boss before the 15 turns are over, then no matter how much strategy you have, you're not going to be able to beat it. But if you do have powerful characters, and my characters aren't great, I have a few of my higher level characters in here, but if you do have well-built characters, then you should be able to piece this fight together with that key information. So I'm moving Landius over here to give the tinder buff back to Leon. And then moving all my other characters to the south here. And that's because I know he has a line attack queued up, so I wanted to make sure there are more characters on the bottom side of the boss than the side where Leon was. I found the easiest way to make sure that I was keeping the buff away on those key turns was to just go and stand beside someone who had already moved. So if I had to, I would even just take one of the characters who didn't have the buff and move them out of the way just to be a target for someone to go and plant the buff on. That way you know you're not like accidentally giving it to someone who still has a move left, and then that person might have nowhere to go, or that person might have to dump the buff on someone who doesn't have a good place to put it. So that's one little trick that you can kind of use if you know one of those line attacks is coming up, or if you know you have to get away from the boss to get away from that tornado. Is just use one of your characters to go stand somewhere and not do anything, and use their turn up, and then you know that you can give the buff to that person safely. So thankfully my Leon and my Luna are both kind of in the mix here, and they're both fairly mobile and fairly powerful, so they've been kind of on Ghost Cloud duty. Now when you have these characters that don't have the buff, and they can't really do anything, then the best thing you can do for them is to try to find a position that they can stand, where on the next turn they'll be in a good position to get the buff from someone, and then attack from a place that will then pass the buff on to someone else who's useful. And that can be kind of tricky to explain or show or point out. You kind of have to get a feel for it. So I will say I'm sorry about not posting a video yesterday for the final plot battle, but it's funny, as I was complaining in the video before that, where you just fight Jugler, about how it was just a straightforward fight, then this final plot battle comes out, and it's even more, it's just a straight up brawl. Like, you literally just have tons of units against tons of enemy units, and you just have to go to town and wail on them. So for a fight that long, where you're just kind of moving units in and attacking, I didn't find it very interesting or strategically compelling, let's say. So I hope you'll forgive me for not posting a video for that one. Now, see, the key on this turn, I wasn't able to finish that ghost off, so I want to make sure that wherever I leave the tinder is out of the ghost's range. So that's why I kind of use Luna and Liana there to body block the ghost a little bit, so he has to go around the long way to try to get at whoever has the tinder. Now, Elwin has it here, so I'm just checking the ghost's range to make sure that if Elwin gives the tinder to Leon, that we'll still be fine. And we will be. No matter who Elwin gives it to, that ghost can't hit us. And it was Leon. The other thing to mention, I guess, is that if you have characters that are a lot more powerful than mine, this battle won't go on as long, and you won't need to worry about as many turns of passing this thing back and forth. If you do enough damage to take this guy out in like 6 or 8 turns, then you're laughing. For me, I need to take a few more than that. So I'm going to go down here. I don't really care who I hand the buff off to between Matthew and Landius. It's going to be Matthew. I'm just making sure this guy can't reach any of the characters or any of the places I'm thinking about moving Matthew to. His danger zone is actually a little deceiving too, because he does have a ranged attack, which isn't reflected here. So give him 1 extra space for the ranged attack. I'll move in here, use my buff, and then I'm not concerned about which character I pass this off to. It's going to be Liana. And I can just safely heal up from way over here, knowing that she'll just pass it back to Matthew, who is already acted, so I don't need to worry about him. And he's outside the boss's range. Literally just trying to get Luna into a decent position for the next turn. So there is the surroundy attack, which is why I moved Matthew out over to Liana. Now, Leon should be in good enough shape to take this imminently threatening Cloud Ghost. I just want to be careful about where I'm moving, who I'm giving the buff to, because I know he has a line attack coming up. So if I give it to Luna, that's the other thing that you have to be careful of if you have characters who have move again or act again after their action. Your brain kind of tricks itself into thinking that because you attacked from beside an ally, it has passed the buff, but the buff actually won't pass until you do your final move and end your action. Now that's not true of moves that you do before your actions, like Chivalry or Wind Spiral. You will actually pass the buff when you use those moves. So that makes it a little bit confusing again for my small brain to keep track of where I put it or where I didn't put it. So you can see here I accidentally moved 1 spot farther than I meant to. I meant to go beside Landius and hand it to him. But my brain tricked itself into thinking I had already passed it to him because she still had her move again. So that was a little mistake, and if you didn't have the clock, that would cost you. Give it to Landius, and then Landius gives it right back to Luna. Luna, who has already acted, so we don't have to worry about it. There's only 2 characters over there, so he's not going to shoot the line at them. He's going to shoot the line over to the right. This Cloud Ghost is still far enough away not to hit us. Now we're starting to get in up to our necks, though, because we have 2 Cloud Ghosts on this side right beside us. So I'm just moving Leon over to act him again, get him a little bit of healing. And then he can go and take out one of these ghosts. And then again, attempt to body block this one. Matthew's actually breezed, so he's able to get in here and take a pot shot at this. Not enough to kill it, but enough for someone to kill it. So you can see if you get backed up on these ads, it really takes away from your DPS opportunities. Because that's 3 characters that I just had to use to clear ghost clouds, and now I have really limited opportunity to do any damage to the boss before getting the tinder to a safe place. RNG does play a big factor here too, obviously, in terms of where the ghosts spawn. And then if you're running a different team, you know, you'll have your typical critical hit or breeze proc RNG as well. So obviously, unlike my plot battle guides, this one's not meant to be followed step by step, because you're not going to have the same team as me. But really, it's more about that kind of mechanical explanation and demonstration. So the way his cooldowns line up, you actually get a turn every once in a while where he can't do the tornado move or the dark line move. Those turns are really great. You want to be able to do as much damage as you can to him on those turns. They're basically turns where he can't threaten your tinder. So you can cycle your characters as well as possible to try to have as many of your characters as possible hit him on that turn, because you don't need to worry about if the tinder ends up right beside him. He can't do anything about it. So if you are drawing a chart similar to mine, or at least keeping notes or keeping track of what his cooldowns are, make special note of those turns where he can't use either move, because you're going to want to take advantage. Since I have the buff, I might as well attack. I can always do my faction buff another time. So we're going to hand this off to Luna. So Luna will be in charge of getting it to safety. Thankfully, Matthew is already one space away from the boss, and she has an easy slot to get beside him and no one else. So he'll do his little tornado move. Now on this turn, he is lined up. He's slated to do his dark line move, but I know his hit points are low enough that if I just unload on him, I should be able to finish him. So rather than try to square everyone away off to one side, I'm just going to attack from places where I know I can hand the buff to more DPS units. So Luna will do an attack here beside Leon, making sure he gets the buff next. And then Leon has an open square to come up here and attack, finishing him off. Beautiful. So that is the first challenge. The Midsummer Night's Dream candle collecting, skin ticket collecting challenge. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully the long and rambling introduction was the most helpful part, and you can go off and beat this challenge with your own team. And maybe you learned some lessons from seeing a couple of my mistakes and from seeing my weak characters actually drag this guy enough to beat him. Once again, hopefully that video was helpful. Wouldn't mind if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. I know I hate to say that in these videos, but every once in a while doesn't hurt. So enjoy the rest of the fireworks festival, everyone. Thanks for watching. Happy Langrissing.